Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the 27th episode of the PictureMonk podcast. My name is Jordan from PictureMonk.com, and you're joined by at least five photographers or people who follow me on Periscope. So this was a thing that I started a while back, and I just now got it going. Kind of cool that you can actually record this live and get it going. So if you don't follow me on Periscope, download the app, follow me on Twitter, and you can get the link to my profile. You should be able to get it on there, and you can follow me and join in live. I usually do these every Saturday. So let's go ahead and get into some news topics before I get into the main topic of today's episode, and that is going to be a kind of a cool thing that Adobe released, a new website quiz thing that they released on I think it was for the 25th anniversary, which was a while back, of Photoshop. And it had to do with is a certain photo real or is it Photoshopped? Like, it's a quiz, so it's like, I think it's 25 questions, and they show you a photo, and you just say whether it's Photoshopped or if it's real. And it's a pretty cool little quiz. I took it and I didn't do very well. I think out of 25 I got let's see, I think it was 14 or 15 right. So I didn't do too well. Some of them are pretty tricky, and some people are really good at Photoshop. So I just thought I'd share that with you guys. I actually heard it from another podcast that I listen to, and that is the We Geeks podcast. If you haven't heard of that, it's a podcast by Howard Pinsky and Nathaniel Dotson. They are YouTube guys that I followed for a while, and they have their own podcast that they kind of just talk tech stuff, design stuff, photography stuff. And so they actually cued me in on it, so I thought I'd share it with you guys and let you take the quiz and see how good you do. So if you head over to PictureMonk.com/PMP027, if you head over there, you can actually take the quiz yourself and see how it is. If you're following me on Periscope right now, you won't be able to go to that link until Friday, so make sure you tune back in on Friday. Download the PictureMonk podcast, and you can follow in on all the photography goodness out there. So let's go on to the next quick news topic, and that has to do with a drone that was, I guess it was a Kickstarter drone. You guys probably have heard of the DJI drones and stuff like that. There's a bunch of drones out there, but this one is called the Lily drone. And I'm not a real big gear guy. I mean, I do like a lot of gear, but I really, really want this drone. And it's basically, if you ever heard of the Solo Shot, the Solo Shot is it's a camera, or it's a device that you hook onto your camera, and you wear a wrist bracelet that's a GPS tracker. And so the device actually communicates with a tracker on your wrist, and it basically just follows you wherever you go. So it'll point the camera. If you watch some YouTube videos out there, they have ads that run on YouTube videos, and they show the advertisement for the Solo Shot, and it black helicopters. If you hear me read stupid stuff, it's from one of my friends on Periscope. It's kind of hard to concentrate on a podcast and Periscope at the same time. But it's a Lily drone, and it like I said, it works with the Solo Shot. It tracks your location with the GPS bracelet, and the Lily drone is basically the same thing, except it's an actual flying drone. You don't have to stop. It's no big deal. Again, Periscope. It's kind of all over the place. See how much fun we're having on Periscope? Come on, guys, join me on there. But anyway, back to the Lily drone. So it follows you. You throw it up in the air, and you literally just throw the drone up in the air, and it starts up. The propellers start up, and it starts following you. There's actually a cool video, a little promo video that you can go to www.lily.camera. So that's LILY.camera, and you can see this drone. And there's a guy literally just throwing it up in the air. He has the bracelet on, and then he goes snowboarding, and then you can see the drone behind him following him in like a cinematic fashion. and yeah, it's following him. He's jumping up and down all over the place. So yeah, it's really cool. I really want that. Unfortunately it's $500, and that's the pre-order price. When it goes on sale to the masses, it'll probably be around $900 or $999, so $1,000. And but anyway, it's really cool. I would really want that. Right when I saw the video of it, I thought that would be so cool to see. So yeah, it's a really cool drone. Check out the video at lily.camera, or just go to picturemonk.com/PMP027 and you can see it there. So the main topic for this episode, like I said for the last episode, if you haven't listened to it, is some run-over questions that I've had. I've had a lot of questions come in and actually put them out on Facebook and Twitter, I believe, on Friday, so yesterday, and got a couple more questions in. But before I actually get into these questions, I wanted to show you something that came in the mail today, which you won't be able to see this if you're listening to it live or listening to it on Tuesday. But if you are on Periscope, you can see it. And it's actually a shirt that I designed that came in. And it's if you want to go over to picturemonk.com/shop, I have an apparel section on there, and you can see the shop with the clothes and stuff like that. But it's kind of a cool shirt. It's got my logo in the camera, and it looks like you're wearing a camera with you at all times. And that's kind of what I called it. I called it "Always Wear Your Camera" or "Always Bring Your Camera" or something like that. So just thought it was a cool little thing, and I got it out there, and it's actually really comfortable. It's a really comfortable shirt. I didn't think it would be that comfortable, actually, but it fits pretty nice. So, but yeah, if you want to check that out, go to picturemonk.com/shop, and you can see a couple other shirts I got out there. But it's pretty fun to do that kind of stuff. So, all right, now that I got that out of the way, got the little self-indulgent thing out of the way, I'm actually probably going to go ahead and cut the Periscope off. I don't mean to piss the people off that are watching. Yeah, this stuff like this, I get my dad saying stuff because he's watching me. But yeah, I might go ahead and cut the Periscope off because it's gonna really gonna sidetrack me with these questions. But so I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. But yeah, thank you guys for watching on Periscope. I'm gonna cut it off short real quick and go get these questions answered for these guys. So all right, take care, guys. Take care on Periscope. All right, so now that we got that taken care of, yeah, it's kind of fun to see. I might have to do a whole podcast where I just basically answers questions from Periscope. I think that would be kind of fun. Just got to get a little bit more people on there, but yeah, go make sure you follow me on there. It's pretty fun to do that sort of thing. So, all right, let's get into the first question. Let's get these knocked out. So, the first question is from David Shaw. And he says, I just bought a wide-angle lens. It's the Canon 70 to or 14 to, I can't read. It's the Canon 17 to 40 f4 based on your recommendation, and I love it. Cool. I'm glad you like it. That's one of my favorite lenses that I have. I always pop that one on my camera. So it says, I do find, however, that I can never get any images straight and always have to correct them in Lightroom. Do you have any recommendations on how to correct this? I do have a couple recommendations because I may know what you're talking about. It usually happens with wide angle lenses. You have to be really, really careful with your angles on wide angle lenses because they can get wonky really easy. And so one thing that I bought to actually help me correct this, which you might not have to buy something like this, but if you do, there's a really cheap option to help you make sure you get really straight angles, and that's a bubble level. You might already have one in like a toolbox somewhere, just like a regular homemade bubble level from like a hardware store or something like that. You can always just pop that in your camera bag, and once you have your lens or your camera on a tripod, pop the bubble level on top, make sure it's level that way, and then take your photos. Usually I do that with real estate photos to make sure I'm getting really good straight lines. But if you don't want to have just a crazy bubble level with you all the time, I did buy a bubble level that is a 3-axis bubble level, and it goes on your hot shoe on your camera. So it just slides right into the hot shoe, and you can see, if your verticals are off, your horizontals are off, that sort of thing. It's only, I think it's $2 on Amazon or something like that. It's really, really cheap. So if you want to check that out, I actually just released a new section on the website. I haven't promoted it yet, pretty much just because I'm trying to still get a couple things added, but the basics are up there, and it's a recommended gear section. And you can go to PictureMonk.com/gear, and that'll take you to the recommended gear section. And there's cameras that I recommend, bags, tripods, that sort of thing. But in the accessories section, you'll actually find the bubble level, and when you click on that, it'll take you to Amazon, and you can get the updated pricing that way. And like I said, it's really cheap. It's only $2, $3, something like that. It's pretty cheap. It's probably the cheapest accessory I have, and but it really works well. So I would recommend getting something like that, and also make sure that you, when you import your photos into Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever, put in make sure you toggle on the lens correction, and that will definitely help out. So I hope that answers your question. I definitely would grab that cheap accessory to help out with your photos. So thank you, David. And let's go on to the next question. The next question is from Fleor. I guess that's how you say the name, Fleor. I think that's how you say it. But it's thank you for the podcast. Enjoy listening. Can you tell me how much sharpening you would recommend for portrait photography, and does noise reduction alter your sharpening? To the last part of the question, yes, noise reduction does alter your sharpening. What I normally do for portraits is you don't want to go too crazy overboard with the sharpening, because that's going to throw out a lot of detail that you necessarily might not want. There are photos that you might have seen where if it's like, if you're trying to go for this sort of mood, they'll get like old people with a whole bunch of wrinkles on their face, and they'll pump up the clarity in Lightroom, increase the sharpening. It just makes for a really gritty photo. That's cool for that effect, but you don't really necessarily want that on everybody. Makes sense, So what I normally do for sharpening is, if you might have heard in my other podcasts or videos on YouTube or something like that, I have a specific number of sharpening for the sharpening that I do, and this applies to both Photoshop and Lightroom, and that's for the amount to be, when you go under the sharpening in the detail panel, the amount to be 100 and the radius to be 1.5. For portraits, I normally don't do that. For every other type of photography, that's the amount I do. But for portraits, I normally back that off a little bit. And I actually had to shoot a couple headshots recently for my work, and I had to make sure I had some good sharpening going on, and also a little bit of detail. So what I actually did is to go into the detail panel, leave the radius at 1, I believe. I think that's the default. It keeps on there. But then also take the amount and probably go around 70, 75. That's normally the range, I guess, I get around there. It just depends on, the focal length of your lens, that sort of thing. But that's the average. And then I will take the masking up a little bit. I'll take it to where, in the masking, if you take it to the higher you go, the more edges that are sharpened. And you can actually hold down Option on a Mac or Alt on a PC, and you can see what details are being sharpened. I'll do that. But the other thing that I do that is, not a lot of people do this, but it really adds a subtle effect to your photo, is the clarity. I will take the clarity down probably between 5 to 10, so -5 to 10, just to make sure I can smooth out a little bit of blemish in the skin without having to retouch it yourself. Just smooth out a little bit of that, but while you have the sharpening applied, you still retain the detail. So as far as the noise reduction, that will alter the sharpening of your photos. If you don't have to put the noise reduction on, don't do it. It's going to kind of muddy it up a little bit. If you have to put it on, that's great. Just make sure you play with the detail slider on the noise reduction. That'll bring back a little more detail. So yeah, if you don't have to put it on there, don't do it. I try not to put it on there as much as possible. But, sometimes higher ISOs, you definitely have to keep it on there. So I hope that answers your question. Thanks again for sending in the question. And I believe you were from Australia. So that's kind of cool. It's PictureMonk International. I'm all all over the place. That's a pretty cool thing. So thank you for being a supporter of the website. I very much appreciate it. So let's get on to the next question, and that is from Travis. Travis, that I don't have a last name, and I don't know where you're from, but Travis asked, cool podcast, just started listening, really great. Oh, thank you very much. When taking portraits, how do you get a really blurry background without having a prime lens? That's really easy to do. If you have a telephoto lens, you can definitely get the really blurry background. If you have your kind of a kit lens, your 18 to 55 or 24 to 105, that sort of thing. If you have that, what you basically need to do is zoom it out to the longest focal length you have. So for my kit lens, for say, it's a 24 to 105, so I'll zoom it out all the way to 105, and then you back up as much as you can without sacrificing your composition. So if you want to get a really good headshot, just back up as far as you can to where you got the head in there, and it's composed the way you want to. And since you're zoomed out enough and you're back up enough, you're compressing the background and getting all that bokeh, which is the blurry background. You're getting that in the background. It's not going to be really crazy like you would get if you were at like a 50 millimeter 1.8. It's not going to be that crazy, that blurry, but you definitely want to have that, and make sure you bump your aperture down to as low as it'll go. For most kit lenses, it's a variable aperture lens, meaning if you're zoomed to 24, it'll be an f4 lens, but when you zoom out to 105, it'll be an f5.6, and that's the lowest it can go. Just go to the lowest aperture you can, and you'll definitely be able to get that effect. Obviously, if you want to kind of get a more blurry background with more options for lenses, definitely go with the 51.8. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can actually head over to the recommended gear section again and go under the lenses category. And I have the Canon 50 millimeter 1.8 for which is the one I have, and also have the Nikon 1.8. And you can check whichever camera you have. You can actually check those out there. But yeah, you can definitely get that effect. You just have to zoom out as long as you can go, drop your aperture as low as it'll go, and then back up enough to where you can get a good composition. So that's how you do that. So thank you, Travis, for the question. And let's get on to the next question. And that has to do with another camera question. Here we go. I just got a used Canon T5i off eBay, and I noticed that my photos are coming out sort of dull and dark. I just learned how to shoot in AV mode and just want to make sure I am doing everything right and not make sure my camera is broken. Thanks for the podcast. And that's from Don W. You're probably not doing anything wrong. Your camera's probably fine. Let's see. You started shooting in AV mode. Yeah, if you're shooting in one of the automatic modes, which, AV is like a automatic pro mode, it's aperture priority mode. If you're shooting in that mode, your camera's going to get you a neutral exposure all the time. It's going to try to hit a neutral exposure no matter what ISO you have, what shutter speed you have, that sort of thing. What I do is, because I think I know what you're talking about, normally when I shoot in that mode, if I'm just kind of running and gunning it, I will notice that my images is a little darker when I get them back on the computer. And so what I do is I dial in a little bit of exposure compensation. If I remember correctly, you hit the Q button on the Canon T5i, and then you can go to the metering section and just turn the wheel once, and it'll go to like turn the wheel to the right once, and it'll dial in exposure compensation of like a third of a stop. So a third of a stop brighter. And what it'll do every time you take a picture, it'll be a third of a stop brighter depending on, what the camera chooses. So if you do that right now, you take a picture of, a computer or something like that, a wall or whatever, it's going to be dark. And then you turn that black section back up, or the exposure compensation back up. You turn that up, it'll be a little bit darker, and then you do it more, and it'll be a little bit lighter. It'll be a little bit lighter again, and you keep going. You can dial in a lot of exposure compensation. So if you don't know exactly how to do that, if I told you wrong, just look into your camera's manual. It'll tell you exactly how to dial that in. And so that's what I usually do. If I'm in AV mode, then I will, because I normally try to shoot manual as much as possible, but if I'm in AV mode, aperture priority mode, I will dial the little bit of exposure compensation, probably about 1/3 of a stop or 2/3 of a stop, and that will dial that in, and your photos will be brighter, and when you get them on the computer, they'll be brighter as well. So I hope that answers your question, Don. Thank you for the question very much. And for the last question here, it is from Leo Foster, and he is from Lake Park, Iowa. And he says, how do I get really sharp images when photographing sports? My son's basketball photos that I've shot are really blurry. I even put it in sports mode, and they are still blurry. Thanks for the podcast. Hope my question made the podcast. It did. So it's going to be tricky, depending on what camera you have, because I don't know. When you're shooting sports photos, especially basketball photos, you're going to be in a kind of a dull, dark gymnasium, so you need a lot of light to make sure you get a fast enough shutter speed to not have blurry images. This actually kind of this little story will kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about. Just actually yesterday, my wife and I went to a baseball game. Bright day, not a cloud in the sky. We went to a late baseball game, and when I first got there, I brought out the camera, because I take my camera every time. Brought out my camera, and I put my 300 millimeter lens on there and zoomed in to the pitcher, trying to get to freeze the action of him throwing the ball. So I lowered my aperture as low as it can go. I cranked up my shutter speed to, I think it was 1/1200th of a second, I think, or 1500th of a second. Pretty fast. I cranked it up to there, and I had my ISO, I can't remember exactly, but it was probably 1600 or so. And I took a couple photos, and it was still blurry. You could still see the arm not being frozen in the air. Even at those crazy high settings. Granted, that's an extreme example because his arm is going really fast when he's throwing the ball. But that's a crazy example of, even with those settings, even at frozen at 1/1500th of a second, it still wasn't able to freeze his arm. So you need a lot of light to freeze action to get a high enough shutter speed. And in a gymnasium, that's probably going to be a little difficult to do. So what I would recommend is, depending on what camera you have, you're probably going to get a lot of noise in your camera or in your images, which is fine. You can take that out in Lightroom or Photoshop. But I would crank your let's see, sports mode. Yeah, don't shoot in sports mode. Don't do that. I would try to recommend going into speed priority or TV mode, or T mode, I think. S mode. I don't remember what's on an Nikon, but I know on Canon it's TV. And what that does is it's the shutter priority mode. So you'll take your shutter speed and you set whatever you want your shutter speed to be. So maybe for a dull gymnasium, try 1/800th of a second or something like that, around that range. And then change your ISO to auto. That will give you a little bit more leeway. And then bump your aperture as low as it'll go. And so the camera from then on will calculate what it needs to do to get a neutral exposure or a perfect exposure in what it thinks is a perfect exposure. So it'll definitely try to shoot at 1/800th of a second the whole time. So that's a kind of a quick way to do it. If you don't know how to kind of not shoot stuff in auto mode, start out in TV mode or AV mode and just play around with it. You'll eventually get it. It's really easy to do. You just got to spend time in there. The sports mode, it's basically doing the same thing, trying to do the same thing that I told you, but it's just kind of doing it in a clumsier way. So, but yeah, I hope that helps, Leo. Thank you for the question. And it was kind of good timing because I was able to tell my little baseball story about that. And I was actually just looking at the images a little bit ago, and I like a couple of them. Didn't really go to set out to take photos, but while you're there and you got a camera, might as well. So that's about it. That's the podcast, guys. I appreciate you guys listening. We like I said, we recorded on Periscope earlier, so head on over to Twitter or the App Store or whatever. Download the Periscope app because Periscope is owned by Twitter, and follow me on there. And you guys can get notified when I fire up the Periscope app to record the podcast. And the next thing I would like to ask you guys to do, if you pretty please could, is go to PictureMonk.com/survey. I talked about this in a couple episodes ago, and it's not necessarily rating the podcast. I would appreciate if you guys did that too. Go to iTunes and rate the podcast. But the survey is just a couple questions. Lets me know what you guys do like about the podcast, what you don't like about the podcast. I've never done a podcast before, so this is my first time trying to get this stuff going, and I just want to make sure I'm giving you guys what you need and what you want to hear. So just a couple quick questions. Don't hold back if you're. Don't be shy, and tell me your feelings, basically, even if they're bad. But yeah, tell me your feelings. Let me know what you feel about the podcast, and please head on over to iTunes, rate the podcast. If you follow me on Twitter, I don't know why I didn't put it on Facebook, but if you follow me on Twitter, I posted an image, a little screenshot where the PictureMonk podcast actually broke into the top 300 of the visual arts category. Which is actually kind of cool. I didn't expect that, especially this soon. So it's kind of cool to do that. I know it's a milestone or a small milestone, and I'm like 270 something on the list, but still I'm in the list. You know what I mean? It's kind of cool. But yeah, appreciate you guys listening very much. It's a really cool thing. I like answering these questions for you. I think next episode I'm going to hold off on the questions, just so it doesn't get stale. And try to work on some other things for you guys, and try to help you guys advance photography stuff more, and so you can become better at what you do, and maybe just kind of get a little different insight, I guess. So again, thank you guys for listening. Very much appreciated, and that's about it. I'll see you guys. I guess I'll see you guys Thursday for the In a Snap segment, and that's about it. This is Jordan Yance for PictureMonk.com, and I will talk to you guys in the next episode.